All right, cool. We're screen sharing and recording. So the first thing I wanted to share with you guys, and I'll make the fonts a little bit bigger for you, was important compromises. Now, folks, some of you probably like the way I explain things. For others of you, maybe my way is not the best. So I've linked you to the awesome video for APUSH review for compromises. Most of this information is in there, but I've just simply summarized it a little bit more. He goes into a little bit more detail. So I encourage you, as soon as we're done, watch that 7-minute video, reinforce that stuff. So I put the link right there. First ones I wanted to talk about had to do with our constitutional debate, folks. Remember, during the era right after the American Revolution has been won, we are run by the Articles of Confederation. And those Articles of Confederation are pretty weak for a lot of different reasons. And so when we come together to try to revise the Articles of Confederation, that's called the Constitutional Convention, we come up with an entirely new document. And that document is the Constitution. But in order to get that Constitution written and passed, we've got to have a few compromises in it first. And these are the ones I want you to know about. The first one has to do with representation and how many votes everyone gets. And remember, folks, we've got large populous states like New York and Virginia, and we've got much smaller populated states like Delaware and New Jersey. And there's a real debate over how representation will be allotted. Will states be given totally equal representation like they had under the Articles of Confederation? And that might give 10,000 people in Delaware the same voting power as 100,000 people in New York? Or will it be based on population, where a large populous state has much more voice than a smaller state? Two plans are proposed. The Virginia plan is for big populous states, where we're going to do representation based on population, and New Jersey's for small states, where we're going to give each state an equal voice. The compromise is to adopt both of them, folks, and this is what we have. It's the Great Compromise, and it creates a two-house bicameral Congress. Each of those houses can pass laws. Can create laws, but both houses have to agree to pass it in order for it to be enacted. Again, a law can originate in either one, and both of them have to agree on that law for it to be adopted. So again, understand that one house is based on representation. That's called the House of Representatives. California, I think, has 54. I think Wyoming has 2. And then the Senate is based on equal representation. So that's how our government works today, folks. It's at its very basics. Those of you taking AP Gov next year, you have to know this. This definitely comes up again in that class. Still on the Constitution, let's talk about a few compromises for slavery. Now, we read a great article early in the year, guys, called A Triumph for Slavery. It's still on my website if you want to go back and read it. And they list like 10 different protections for slavery. I just wanted to point out what I think were the most 3 importance, because remember, we've got to get Southern states to ratify the Constitution. If we can't get Southern states to ratify this new document, we're not going to have it. And we're going to be stuck with the Articles of Confederation, which are relatively weak. So in order to get Southerners on board with the new Constitution, the Constitution's going to protect their slaves as property. And that's an important concept to understand. We are going to give a few different concessions to slave owners during this constitutional debate. The first one, and the easiest to remember, is the 3/5 compromise. Remember, folks, now that we're going to base representation based on your population, it's in your best interest to have as many people living in your state as you can. The more people living in your state, the more political voice you get. So all of a sudden, Southerners who want slaves to be counted as property normally, all of a sudden want their slaves to be counted as people, if you're counting number of human beings in there for political representation. They're property every other way unless you're counting for population. That's what the slave owners think. The Northerners don't like that, guys. The Northerners don't want the Southern states to have more political power. And so Northerners say, well, are they property or are they people? What is it, Southerners? And the compromise, guys, is that they count as 3/5 of a person for political representation. So for every 5,000 slaves that a Southern state has, 3,000 of them are actually going to be counted for population. This gives more representation to slave states. It gives them more political voice, gives them more voice in passing laws, gives them more voice in selecting how the country will be run. So you got to know that 3/5 compromise. There are 2 more protections for slavery that I highlighted, and the first one's the Fugitive Slave Clause. It is illegal to help a runaway slave, guys, even early on in the 1790s when we're debating this stuff. It's always been illegal to help a runaway slave. You can't assist someone run away, and if they make their way up to you, you have to essentially return them, or you can be punished. Slaves must be returned to their masters according to our Constitution. And the other one that I thought was really important was the Insurrection Clause. Insurrection's like a rebellion, and that allows the federal government to have the authority to put down a slave revolt, folks. That's like insurance, man. That's like free police force if you're a slave owner. If I own a slave plantation and I've got 300 slaves on it and they revolt, there's a very good chance the federal government's going to come and put that revolt down for me. That's a very, very serious concession that Southerners are given now. It's kind of like having a free police force that will come put that revolt down if the shit hits the fan. So those are three important compromises that are meant to appease Southern slave owners and get them to adopt the Constitution. Any questions so far? Now let's kind of go down to the sectional crisis. This is where we're going to start to see westward expansion and the potential for civil war, guys. So as we've spread west, we've started to populate new areas of the continent. Missouri is a state or a territory that's going to quickly get 60,000 people. And when Missouri writes its constitution, Missouri allows slavery within its state borders. When Missouri applies for statehood, just like they have the right to, this kind of sets off a controversy in Congress, guys, because if we admit Missouri as a slave state, because we've just added a few others, we just added Alabama, we just added Mississippi, we just added Louisiana, we've just added a whole bunch of slave states. Now, if we add Missouri, the balance of power is going to be off. There's going to be more slave states than free states. And this freaks the Northerners out. It freaks free states out. They do not want to see Southerners have a majority in the Congress or in the House of Representatives or in the Senate. So there has to be a compromise. And the compromise is if we add Missouri, we're also going to add another free state to maintain the balance. And that's where Maine comes in. So the Missouri Compromise allows Missouri to come in as a slave state. It also allows Maine to come in as a free state, and then it sets this 36-30 parallel, guys. It's kind of that imaginary line running just south of halfway across the country, and it says slavery will be prohibited above that line. Now, what that means, folks, because remember, Mexico still owns a bunch of the continent. Oregon and Washington still are a contested area. That means slavery has a really small area that it can expand to. It's basically modern-day Arkansas, and that's it. If you want to understand the Mexican-American War, you've got to understand this 36-30 parallel. It really boxes slavery into a small area where it can expand into. But this is the Compromise of 1820, or as we also call it, the Missouri Compromise. This is, folks, one of the earliest kind of movements in the sectional crisis. If you're doing any essay on the spread of slavery or the sectional crisis, the Missouri Compromise is going to be in there for sure. The next compromise has to also do with the spreading west, adding new lands, and the sectional crisis, guys, and it comes after the Mexican-American War. Remember, we took a huge chunk of land in the Mexican-American War. We basically doubled the size of the nation. All of the modern-day Southwest, including California, now belongs to the United States. California has been populated for a long time, or I shouldn't say a long time, not at all a long time. Since the gold rush, it's only been 2 years. I got ahead of myself. But California really quickly gets at 60,000 people. And as soon as you get 60,000, you can apply for admission. California is going to be a free state, folks. They've already decided. When California applies to be a free state, Southerners are, understandably concerned because California is going to be an economic powerhouse. It's very, very populous. It will throw off the balance of power. Southerners don't want to see this happen. And so yet another compromise has to occur. So this is the Compromise of 1850. There's technically 5 parts, but I only really think you need to worry about 3 of them, folks. And I've listed the 3 on there. The video clip up top, that'll tell you about the rest of the other 2, but I just don't think they're that important. So again, here are the 3 for Compromise of 1850. California will be allowed to be admitted as a free state. We've just given the Northerners something big. We've given free states something really big. Now we got to give the Southerners some concessions. We are going to pass an incredibly tough Fugitive Slave Act. Guys, this is what Harriet Beecher Stowe writes Uncle Tom's Cabin about. This is a law that will essentially allow local police officers to deputize citizens and say, hey, it's Saturday and we're going out hunting this runaway slave that we heard is in town. I don't care what you're doing. You are coming with us. And if you don't come with us, you can be subject to a fine. They are literally forcing Northerners to participate in slave roundup and essentially slave patrols. We have slave catchers coming into northern cities and literally kidnapping free blacks. They're saying this man's my slave. And oftentimes, guys, these freedmen don't necessarily have paperwork to prove that they're free. It's not a problem normally in their northern states, but literally we have thousands of free blacks that are kidnapped by slave catchers. They've never been slaves, but they are essentially identified as, hey, that man's my slave. And there's no one essentially to question it or stop it. It's this freedman's word against the slave catcher's word. And this allows for thousands of freedmen to be captured, kidnapped, and brought into southern states and forced into slavery. We also will allow the idea of popular sovereignty onto the books. You got to know what that word means, guys. It means we're going to allow the voters in that area to decide. We can't figure it out in Congress. It's too contested. We don't want to decide. We're going to let the people who live there decide. Now, it doesn't matter in New Mexico and Nevada. There's no one that lives out there. There's no one to populate it yet, and it's not going to turn violent. But when we do this same idea, guys, in Kansas and Nebraska, which is not a compromise, that's a law. That's 1856, Kansas-Nebraska Act. It's not on this list because it's not a compromise. When we do popular sovereignty, Kansas, Nebraska, that's when it turns into bleeding Kansas and results in a huge amount of violence. The other two are kind of minor. There's a border dispute that is solved with Texas, and they stop allowing slaves to be bought and sold in Washington, D.C., but you can still own them. It's kind of weird. Can't buy them or sell them, but you're allowed to own them. I don't even know why that's on there, but those are the two that I left out. The border dispute with Texas, and then the fact that you can own slaves in Washington, D.C., but not buy or sell them. These three are the most important. Free California, tough fugitive slave law, popular sovereignty is introduced. And my last compromise, guys, is the end of Reconstruction compromise. This is the compromise of 1877. So, guys, once 1877 rolls around, we've been doing Reconstruction for 12 years. We've pumped millions of dollars into the South to try to assist the freedmen. We've got government agencies like the Freedmen's Bureau. We've occupied the South with a military force. Remember that Reconstruction Act, folks? We abolished Southern governments. They were playing hardball. They wouldn't enfranchise the freedmen. They were maintaining white supremacy. So we just straight up abolished their governments with the Reconstruction Act. We've been occupying them with a military force now for like 8 or 10 years. In the 1877 presidential election, it is super close, guys. It's one of those ones, just like in 2016 with Trump and Clinton, the winner of the popular vote and the winner of the electoral vote are different. Remember, the Democrats are the party of slavery. The Democrats want to maintain white supremacy. And their guy, Tilden, actually wins the popular vote, just like Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. And the Republicans, obviously the party of Reconstruction, their guy Rutherford B. Hayes, he wins the electoral vote. But there's a whole bunch of controversy with that electoral vote, guys. Historians basically believe a lot of the electoral votes were compromised and essentially corrupted. So Hayes may not have won it. But regardless, in agreeing to end Reconstruction and remove all the troops, the Democrats are essentially going to concede the election and give it to the Republicans. Tilden and the Democrats will say, you know what, Hayes and you Republicans, if you guys will remove the troops and officially end Reconstruction, you can have the presidency. We don't care. If you're going to end Reconstruction and take the troops out of the South, out of our home states, have the presidency. And that's called the Compromise of 1877, guys. This officially ends Reconstruction, and it results in federal troops being withdrawn from the South. This is bad news for the freedmen. All of a sudden, guys, we're going to see freedmen's rights totally quashed in the South. All those freedmen that have been elected to political office in the 1870s, they're going to start losing those offices over the next couple of years. Now is when we're going to start to see major poll taxes, major literacy tests, and serious levels of white supremacy implemented throughout the South. This is what ends Reconstruction. Any questions on those compromises? Cool. Remember, there's a video right there, and I recommend you watch it. Let's do the next one. I don't have it all typed out like I do this next one, but I got some of it typed out. We'll do 6. Just like compromises, folks, there is an important Revolts video, and I've linked you to it right there. Let's make this nice and big. And let's go through it. Stono Rebellion. This is in the 1730s in the, I forget, Carolinas. And this, guys, is, I'm going to just simplify it. It's your typical slave revolt. You know how these work. The snowball idea. Start at 1. Murder the masters. The slaves will join, and the numbers will grow. This one will be a failure. As you guys know, none of these slave revolts are going to end up working. The video clip right above here will give you more information. I guess I was supposed to do colonial ones first. That's okay. I guarantee you they will tell you more about Stono Rebellion, folks, in this video. But You don't have to know that. That's not the most important slave revolt. That's just an example of a colonial era slave revolt. We have an example of a major slave revolt that occurs during the American federal period, Nat Turner in the 1830s. The Stono Rebuttal is the one we know a little that I taught you less about. That's just your example of pre-colonial slave revolts. That's when Great Britain is still in control in the 1730s. Nat Turner in the 1830s, you guys know all about that. 1830s in Virginia, 40 plus people murdered in bed, super crazy, multiple page, very detailed account of the murders given by Turner. The other details of the multiple page very the details, guys, of the revolt, like Nat Turner, being very evangelical and thinking he's got a vision from God. That's not the most important stuff. The most important stuff is the consequences of this. And this slave revolt, guys, is going to really, really scare the shit out of Southerners. They're going to think abolitionists are crazy. They're going to think abolitionists are inciting slaves to do this. They're going to try to connect Nat Turner with William Lloyd Garrison's The Liberator. And they're going to really try to use this example to prove that abolition is dangerous, and we got to stop abolition in its tracks, even if it means, shutting down free speech. This speech is so dangerous. Look at what this speech can do. This speech can cause our slaves to murder us in our bed. That's what you have to know about Nat Turner's slave revolt. It is. Go ahead, ask your question.
I have a quick question. Like, would that, like, an example like that of a rebellion, would that be like, would that be on like a DBQ that's about maybe like abolition or like slavery, the progression of slavery or whatever? Like,
yeah, Aaron, I could see a question about the spread of slavery where this could come up, or I could also see a question about the sectional crisis where this could come up for sure.
Okay.
This in the sectional crisis would probably be not in your documents, but maybe. But this could totally be used. Murders. I think I just want to make sure I got all that right. 1830s Virginia, 40 plus people murdered in bed, super crazy, multi-page, very detailed accounts, gives abolition a bad name. Oh, it's important to know that it's very widely publicized. Scares the hell out of people. Gives abolition a bad name, associated the Liberator with violence, justified the attempts to silence abolitionists. This is why some abolitionists are going to get murdered, folks. This is why some of them will have their printing presses thrown in the river. Cool. Let's go up and do the top of the list. Bacon's Rebellion is 1670s. You guys know this one. This is former indentured servants. And they want fair taxes and the colonial government to protect them from Indians. Remember, folks, all these former indentured servants and their kids, they want to move out west. We can't continue to huddle along the Atlantic coast, forever. And so as these former indentured servants move west I can't type anything. As these former indentured servants move into the interior of the Virginia continent, they of course encounter Indians. There's competition for land and resources. And when these new frontier families and these former indentured servants are attacked by Indians, they want the government to do something about it. And the government won't do anything. Why? Because Indian wars are expensive. The government is non-responsive. Why are they non-responsive? Because it's expensive. I don't want you guys out there. A, I don't want all you poor former indentured servants owning land. This is an era where you have to own land to vote. And B, it's expensive to patrol out there and set up forts out there. I don't have any interest in you guys acquiring land. I would rather you just be living in your little hovels, working as tenants and working for me as opposed to spreading out west. Anyhow, the government is non-responsive. Major revolt that burns Jamestown. The ground. Okay. The revolt will fail but is the marker for the transition to African slavery from indentured servitude. That's really the important part, guys. I mean, there's so many more details for Bacon's Rebellion. It's important. The revolt ultimately is going to fail, but it's the marker for the transition to African slavery from indentured servitude. It's not simply because of this rebellion. It's not like, it's not like everyone in South Carolina and all these other slave owning states, guys, are like, oh my God, you see what happened in Virginia? We better stop with the indentured servants. No, it's just we've been now colonizing North America for like 67 years, 60 some odd years, and it's now not really economically profitable to bring indentured servants. They cause you headaches later down the road when they're free. You have this big giant poor class that you now have to deal with. They don't it's just better to get slaves, essentially, and that's what Bacon's Rebellion will illustrate. So Pontiac's Rebellion, this is an Indian conflict near the Great Lakes. Spelling everything wrong. This is right after the French and Indian War. So I'm going to say it's like 1763. 1763, Indian conflict near the Great Lakes. The British Crown doesn't want to protect people on the frontier. Why? It's expensive. We've talked about this. You're sensing a theme here. So they do the, what am I about to type? So they do the what? What am I about to type? Someone yelled out. What do they do?
The proclamation line?
Yeah. And this is an example of salutary neglect ending. That's what Pontiac's Rebellion is all about. Guys, I wish that I was more educated on the Indian tribe and could tell you a little bit more about them. I don't know, honestly, even what the spark is. I can guarantee you the spark is competition for land and resources, but I don't know specifically. But that competition for land and resources will result in Great Britain telling the settlers, and they're still British colonists, you guys may not settle west of the Appalachian Mountains. It's way too expensive to patrol that frontier. And you're harder to control out there. Want to protect people on the frontier. Cool. And let's do the final two, which are after the American Revolution. We call these the early American Republic revolts, and I already have these typed out. So there's two revolts here, guys. One happens while we're ruled by the Articles of Confederation, and one happens while we are ruled by our brand new Constitution. If someone were to ask you, hey, like, what's our government, who's our president during the American Revolution? There is no president. We are run by the Articles of Confederation. There is no executive. There is no Supreme Court. There is simply one legislative body, or every state has the same vote. You guys have to know that that's our government during the during the American Revolution, and it's okay. It helps us win the war. Does anyone know one other achievement that the Articles of Confederation gets? It's in 1787. It's the last year of its existence.
It's the Northwest Ordinance.
Yeah, that is achieved under the Articles, and the AP test considers that an achievement. So anyhow, we are run by the Articles of Confederation during the American Revolution. Right after the war is over, we're still run by the Articles of Confederation, guys. And here's the situation. We've got the state of Massachusetts, and they've got some pretty unfair tax laws. They are essentially putting debtors in jail, and they're foreclosing on their land. There's not a lot of Massachusetts cash available. Remember, folks, we don't have a Bank of the United States yet. There's not even a uniform currency in this nation. We're a brand new baby country ruled. We don't really have a strong central government, guys. We're more like that loose affiliation of states still at this point. Massachusetts has a low amount of cash for farmers to have access to. They've got unfair tax laws, and they're starting to throw people in jail and foreclose on their land. This is where a man named Daniel Shays will lead a protest, which is essentially made of Revolutionary War veterans. A lot of these men are farmers and military war veterans. They're going to put on their Revolutionary War uniforms, and they're going to essentially arm themselves and shut the courthouses down. They're going to free the debtors from prison. They're going to block the entrance to courthouses so none of these foreclosure proceedings can occur. And essentially, folks, the federal government can't do anything about this. They can't do anything to provide relief to the protesters, and they don't have the authority to come shut it down. So not only can they can't overrule Massachusetts law, and I'm talking about the federal government now. Federal government, they can't overrule Massachusetts. They certainly don't have the authority to call out troops and put down the rebellion. And really, they can't provide any type of relief or stimulus to these people. This shows how weak the Articles of Confederation are, guys. The government can't really do anything to help out right here. They can't put it down. They can't overrule Massachusetts. They can't provide the protesters with aid. This demonstrates the Articles of Confederation are weak. That's Shays' Rebellion. I want to say, we could look the year up. I want to say it's 1787, but please don't quote me on the year, guys. It's right after the war, right after the American Revolutionary War, but before our Constitution. We have those articles for, I think, 7 years. Anyhow, let's do our final revolt or final rebellion. And this, folks, happens under our brand new Constitution with our brand new President, George Washington. This is the Whiskey Rebellion. And this happens in Pennsylvania. And this is a protest on a new tax. Hamilton's trying to raise money for his government. Remember Hamilton's plans, folks? Well, one of Hamilton's plans allows for a tax on products, and that's called an excise tax. Man, Americans trip out about this, folks. You remember their reaction during the American Revolution to different taxes on stuff. They're going to protest the government's tax on whiskey, and they are going to revolt in a similar way that Shays' Rebellion will revolt, folks. But at this time, the federal government can very, very quickly call out the troops and put that revolt down. This is the only time the president has ever led troops into battle. And I'm not saying that George Washington got on a horse and led a charge, folks, but he actually was on the field and he was in uniform and he was essentially there commanding the troops. Not, like I said, he's not leading a charge, but he's there commanding the troops. It's the only time the president has ever done that as the commander in chief. It's the rebellion. The rebellion is quickly crushed. It's not necessarily a good thing. There's not any relief as far as I'm concerned for the people protesting, but it demonstrates just how strong and efficient essentially this new federal government is, guys. They are much stronger and they can now address some of the issues that the Articles of Confederation couldn't address. They have the authority now under the new Constitution to instantly call out federal troops and put that revolt down. They didn't have that under the Articles of Confederation. That's my take on it. That's my short version of it. Watch the...
Tony, I have a question really quickly.
Yeah, go.
So was Shays' Rebellion the one where farmers tried to pay the taxes with whiskey or something, or alcohol?
No, that's the Whiskey Rebellion. And in fact, they're trying to pay... So the taxes on whiskey, in this era, there's still not a huge amount of uniform currency in this nation or anything like that. So a lot of farmers pay their debts with whiskey. And essentially... that is in the Whiskey Rebellion. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but people paying their debts with whiskey, that happened all over the place. It's not just like it was a thing right at this time, dude. That's happened forever. If I have extra grain, I turn it into something I can trade. That's literally how it works. I don't care what kind of extra grain I have. I'm going to turn it into some alcohol if I have the ability to. Makes it able to store longer. So people have been using that as, a bartering item or a form of currency for a long time. And they're pretty upset now that it's being taxed. It was essentially think about it this way, Logan. It's a way to print money that's tax free. If I can, produce 50 gallons of whiskey and trade it for stuff, that's great. I don't have to pay taxes on that whiskey. Now you're telling me I do? Oh, I'm protesting that. That's kind of what it is.
Okay. So I remember.
Go. Sorry.
Yeah, but I thought in Shays' Rebellion, it was they tried to pay with whiskey and then it wasn't allowed, which caused more outrage or something.
That's very possible. So here's the deal with that, Logan. I don't know the answer to that. My knowledge of that event is very, very much superficial. It's very possible that they did try to pay the tax in whiskey and they weren't allowed to in Virginia. Or I'm sorry, in Massachusetts. I'm not actually sure. Could have totally happened. I don't know.
Okay. Thanks.
I wish I had that answer, dude. I'm sorry.
I just had a quick question. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I didn't quite hear. What was the one achievement of the Articles of Confederation?
The Northwest Ordinance. Northwest Ordinance. And the Northwest Ordinance is important. I'll show you a picture real quick. My phone is blowing up. What the heck? I hate group text. Northwest Ordinance, Aaron. I'll show you a picture. Northwest Ordinance is important for a couple regions or reasons. It puts all of this territory off limits to slavery, and it sets the stage for how all future territories will become states. Remember, before an area is as a state, it's a territory. All of the places out west were territories before they came states. All of these states like Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, you can see the years they actually became states, Aaron. They didn't become states for quite a while, some of them. But what the Northwest Ordinance does is two things. Is it bans slavery in this region, and it sets the rules for how all future states will come into the Union. You get 60,000 people. You're allowed to create a constitution, and then you apply for admission, and we give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down in Congress, whether or not you're in. So that's the Northwest Ordinance, and that is an achievement of the Articles of Confederation.
Okay. Would you ever have like a DBQ that was just on like the Articles of Confederation?
No.
That'd just be part of something.
I've seen short answers, but we're not doing short answers. I've totally seen short answers on articles, but no, it is not possible to get a DBQ on the Articles of Confederation.
Okay, thank you.
It could definitely be a DBQ, Aaron, on like the transition from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. There's definitely enough information there. So I could definitely see them giving you a prompt. I don't think it's likely, but I could see them giving you a prompt that asks you to essentially analyze changes in the role of the federal government from the Articles of Confederation, through the adoption of the Constitution or something like that. They'll probably give you a couple years after the Constitution, to provide examples to show how we went from a pretty weak federal government to a pretty strong federal government. That would be your thesis in that case. Well, it was a transition, pretty weak, pretty strong. And you would say, why did we want it weak? Because we just broke away from a king. And how did it get stronger? Oh, Supreme Court decisions, Marbury v. Madison, interstate commerce, that type of stuff. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys, I'm going to stop presenting. Any questions on compromises or revolts? Again, it was not perfect. It was just meant to remind you of what was important and give you the basics. Watch those videos. Each of them is about 5 minutes long, and remind yourself. But anything else for the good of the group? Okay. I guess real quick, we can read a DBQ. I need to screen share again. I thought I could get through it quicker and be done in 30 minutes, but this will just take another few. So I don't think you guys mind since we're all here.
I have to head out, but thank you, Mahoney.
No problem. Bye. So I'm presenting again, guys. I just wanted to show you the read one DBQ for practice number 3. So again, this is the prompt. Hopefully you can read it. I'll try and zoom in a little bit more. I bet most of you on this list or on this chat right now are planning on doing practice number 3. Most of you did practice number 2. So here is the DBQ for practice number 3, and here's the prompt. Some of you have probably already read it. Evaluate the relative importance of different causes for the expanding role of the United States in the world from 1865 to 1910. They're asking you guys, why does the United States expand its role in the world? It has to do with trade. They want you to talk about probably about some of those treaties with China and Japan, maybe the Burlingame Treaty or the Treaty of Kawangawa. Those are early 1860s treaties. They want you to talk about things like social Darwinism. Why do we go into the Spanish-American War? Open door policy and trade with China, social Darwinism and the white man's burden with the Filipinos. It's those types of things. That's the basic content of this DBQ. So if reading the prompt didn't make any sense, hopefully that refreshed some of you. I don't want to go through all of the sources right now. I just want to show you what a sample of a good DBQ of that looks like. We'll read the top one. All of the sources, guys, I guess let's look at the title of them. One of the sources is a treaty about Russian possessions. Remember, there's claims for Alaska. There's claims that Russia has. There's claims in the Pacific Northwest, Washington, that Russia has had. There's a source about the strength of the Anglo-Saxon race and religion. There's a source about naval power. There's a cartoon that we looked at. That's William McKinley eating at the dinner table, where he's looking at the menu at the, and Uncle Sam's the waiter, or I'm sorry, Uncle Sam's, eating dinner, and he's looking at the menu, and I don't know which to take first: the Puerto Rico pig, the Philippine sandwich, or the things like that. We saw that. There's another open door to, there's an open door to China source. There is another political cartoon about educating Filipinos. That's like the white man's burden. And here's one about Teddy Roosevelt's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. So those are the types of sources that are on there. Let's read the sample. Gosh, this is a lot of information they give. This is all explanations of stuff, guys. So, and by the way, I'm not going to provide you with this yet, but if you really want to, folks, you could pull this up. This is the 2018 DBQ. It's online for you. I will post it when we're all done on Monday when we've gone over it, but just so you're aware, it's there. So let's read the good one. This is the one that's going to get a good score. As the Civil War came to a close, the previously Confederate South seemed to be in shambles. Cities were destroyed, properties looted, no labor force for their esteemed cotton. Yet the North seemed to be enjoying a rapid increase in the economy and the expansion of industrialization. This can in part be attributed to the favorable tariffs, like the Morrill Tariff, passed during the wartime years, and better technology and mechanization that allowed corporations to thrive in the post-war years, such as the U.S. Steel and Standard Oil. Yet as time went on, the growing surplus of manufactured goods sparked Americans' interest in retreating from prior isolationist years and entering an era of increased American involvement globally to seek overseas markets for goods. That thesis is awesome. I did not like their context. That's going to get the point, but I didn't love their context. I really like their thesis so far, guys. They're saying that we are now an industrial nation and we have produced so much stuff that we can't consume it all. They are saying that economic manufacturing and the need to sell this stuff abroad is going to force us to retreat from our isolation. That's a really, really good thesis statement. Involvement to seek global overseas markets for our goods. Thus, an age of imperialism began as America rushed to catch up with the other colonizing nations and experienced a growth in motives to expand. The United States primarily sought to increase its role in the world due to the notion that America and the American lifestyle was superior, and to also gain strategic territory to expand their influence globally. Despite these strong imperialist sentiments, however, there were still many who were against the movement and considered it a moral wrongdoing. Folks, this person has written way more than most of you will. I almost want to read a different one just because this person is... I think this is less is more. And you all know, all of you probably have one or two people in your class who are A students and really, really smart, but they write way too much. This person's saying a lot. Sometimes it's hard to grade when you say that much. Despite these strong imperialist sentiments, there were still many who were against the movement and considered it a moral wrongdoing. One of the primary reasons behind imperialism was the general assumption that America was better in regards to other nations. Josiah Strong claimed that as a superior white Anglo-Saxon race, America, which was still largely white, must expand to other lands to impress its superior democracy, Christianity, and lifestyle upon them. Document 2. Strong clearly speaks, so guys, that's how they use Document 2 to support their claim. This is how they do the sourcing. Remember how you got to talk about point of view or audience or purpose? This is how they did that for Document 2. Strong clearly speaks to other imperialists to convince them that America has the obligation to expand to lands that do not share similar lifestyles to America and that they do not have a similar government. That was a decent way to do it. Similarly, Captain Alfred Mann argued for a stronger navy to complement the obvious superiority of America and to take part in imperialism in order to increase the nation's influence on the weaker Caribbean and Central American countries. Document 3. Once again, Mann shares the sentiment that it is crucial to expand to other lands due to America's superiority. These sentiments would come to arise during the Spanish-American War, where America gained greater control of territories like Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines and Sandwich Islands. Document 4. The point of view of the artist is actually critical of America's policy of imperialism, seeing it as a sign. Guys, do you see how after every single document, whether it's after Document 2, Document 3, Document 4, they're providing all that source information? Once again, Mann shares the sentiment. The point of view of the artist, look at those sentence starters they used. And yeah, the point of view of the artist is actually critical of America's policy of imperialism, seeing it as a sign of America's ego and its superiority and greed. Many anti-imperialists at the time saw imperialism as a moral wrong due to America. Ironically, once being a colonized land as well, but being hypocritical in its policies toward other foreign lands. However, this failed to stop many imperialist goals. In the Philippines, America tried to forcibly impose American standards of education and government on the Filipinos. Otherwise, they would use military force. Document 6. At the time, rebels like Emilio Aguinaldo fought back against the imperialist America, but to no real success due to America's persistence in spreading their superior lifestyle. That's evidence beyond the documents right there. There's nothing about Aguinaldo in the documents. Apart from America's alleged superiority, another reason for expansion in the world was to gain strategic territory for influence in global affairs. The very roots of America stepping into imperialism in the time period can be traced back to the very years after the Civil War. America signed a treaty with Russia, allowing for the cession of Russian lands in North America and surrounding islands. When I wrote this DBQ, guys, not this one. I did not write the one we're reading. When I've done this one in the past, document 1, I could never figure out how to use it. They tried to use it here. Apparently it works, but I was never able to use the Russia document myself. This theme of North American dominance, but they're connecting it to a theme of North American dominance. That was smart of them. This theme of North American dominance can be connected to the Monroe Doctrine. Ooh, good. In which it was declared that European powers could no longer claim territory in North America, also in Central America. This treaty shows how much they wanted to expand their influence on the Americas. John Hay, Secretary of State, also negotiated a policy in which foreign powers in China would agree to maintain an open door policy to protect China's own interest and maintain peace. Document 5. However, the main motive behind the open door note was to allow for easier access for America to have markets in China and gain strategic influence there. Furthermore, President Roosevelt claimed that it is imperative for stronger nations like America to intervene in unstable countries and maintain, quote, international police power. Document 7. From the point of view of a staunch imperialist, Roosevelt believed that by intervening in weaker countries, America would gain more influence in the world with its increased presence. Thus, his sentiments would lead to the creation of the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, where he justified American intervention in Latin America to protect democratic interest, but really also to gain more global power, an objective America constantly sought after the Civil War. Although America did seem to begin its imperialist roots in the era of industrialization after the Civil War to promote its superiority and gain influence, it should be noted that these behaviors continued on to other decades of the 20th century, such as after World War I, with the occupation of Germany, and to extend influence and also in the Middle East in the later part of the century for strategic oil interests. This is their analysis point. This is them connecting this to a different time period to get the analysis point. Indeed, America's expansionist policies have not disappeared, and many have criticized America's ulterior motives. Bam. That was pretty good. There are 3 more on there, folks, that I'll give you access to, and if you really want to see them before I give you access to them, you can Google them and figure it out. That was from 2018. So, hopefully that was helpful. I know that we just narrated it, but hopefully just reading someone else's words was helpful and gives you some pointers. So hopefully that was good. Anything else you guys need or any other questions you got?
Thank you. It was really helpful to do this.
Cool. You guys